everyone. Welcome to episode 3. Here we are again, level up enablement style. So we're talking about today, what is the specific role of an enablement associate, or you might be familiar with them as called as the enablement coordinators. Very interchangeable, very different from different spots and different perspectives. So you might be called one thing, you might be doing different actions. So please note that as we're going through these different roles that stuff just might change. We don't know exactly what enablement role you or title you might have and the responsibilities they have, but we're going off of the basis of just a familiarity there and rolling with it, and we're gonna share it all with you guys. So Ashton, welcome to week 3. Here we are again.
I can't believe it's week 3. I'm pumped.
This is so great. I love it. All right, without further ado, let's jump into enablement, the associate or the coordinator.
Clocks are ticking all the time.
Here we are, week 3. Let's talk about it. Enablement, associate, and coordinator. Kick us off. Tell us what that role looks like to you, and how do we plan for one of them?
Yeah, so I guess I'll define it as how I define it for my team. But I will say that this week I actually tried to look up some of the roles because there's so many enablement roles as we were talking about. And people define an enablement associate or coordinator in a lot of different ways. So for my team, it's usually an intern position, and we have kind of an associate, which just means that they're an intern and it's time-based, or they're a specialist or coordinator, which means it's a full-time role. Same thing, just it's about the time. But what they usually focus on is their main responsibility is content and communications. And so they might be coordinating onboarding, they might be delivering kind of sales plays and designing them and putting them together, or supporting in kind of the creation of decks. But they're really doing a lot of the content management and owning that like taxonomy and keeping things in flow so that people can find what they need easily. Sometimes they might also, at that stage, they're learning enablement. So they get to dip their toes in a bunch of stuff. I might have them facilitate a training. They might get to like build a course or a section of it. But the idea is that this person's knowledge is really centered around how do I understand the flow of content and communication that needs to happen for my teams and make sure that I'm keeping everyone accountable to that system.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I started out actually as a coordinator. That was my very first role at Huddle, which was awesome. Never knowing what enablement was. So that was cool. I get to really, like, as you said, dip my toes into the water to really see what enablement was like. And you're exactly right. Like we actually, or in my role, I really did make sure that content management was probably the most important job that I had, as well as communication for our sales team. And how did we deliver? How do we communicate that? What's the cadence of those? And where do people go to go get that information? I will say, you did say like enablement associate can often be referred to as like an intern as well too. I actually started an intern program. So we actually have enablement interns. So that was kind of a cool way to transition a lot of that, I felt. I've actually never heard of the associate at this point until we were like developing this out. So I think it's awesome, just very interchangeable at the same time.
For sure. I think what was interesting is as I was actually looking up the role and seeing kind of how are companies defining it today, because realistically, as businesses change, like the scope of these roles change, what people need changes. And there's just a really big focus on content management and creation, as well as early facilitation and training. And so usually that role is like, you're going to be responsible for being the face of the training. You might not build it, but you're going to have to execute it. So it's a really high execution role where delivering things on time is critical. And I think that's unified across whether you're training responsibility, coordinating responsibility, or content responsibility.
Yeah. So where do you see, I mean, we kind of just dabbled in this a little bit, but being an associate coordinator, wherever we're looking at, it's a very entry level position, which is great. Don't be alarmed if you've never done enablement before. Do not be alarmed if they're talking to you to be an associate or coordinator. Like, very easy. I'm going to be very upfront. I actually was only a coordinator for 3 months before I was actually promoted into a specialist role. So very different. Just know that it's a way to get introduced and understand what enablement is, understand how to work with it, understand where and how your customers need to be served and communicated to. So please do not be alarmed that it is an entry-level position. And there are other specialists and everything else can also be entry level as well too. So please don't be alarmed because it says coordinator.
I think the part here that's also really important to point out is that if a company is hiring for an enablement associate or coordinator, that's actually super beneficial, because what happened, 5-10 years ago is there was only an enablement manager or there was only an enablement lead. And this person got hired with no experience, no structure, to be the very first person to build out a function. And everyone had to kind of have battle scars to like just figure it out. Yeah. Whereas if you're joining a team that has an enablement associate or coordinator, you're definitely getting a company that like understands what enablement is. You're going to have some type of structure. You're going to see what good looks like. And I don't know, like I wish in my career that I would have had that kind of experience to really learn it before I owned it, if that makes sense. Yeah. Right? Like figuring out taxonomy for the first time when you're like the manager of the whole department is a little bit daunting. Whereas as a coordinator, you have the time to really figure out what type of enablement you're most passionate about, because you do get this full view of all the teams. You work so much more cross-functionally because you're executing, which means like you're meeting with stakeholders often, and meeting with the new teams, as well as getting mentorship. And I think we talk about having a network and having a mentorship opportunity. Like, I don't know that there's a better one than this role if you're starting out.
No, this is great. Especially like, I really suggest listening tours in any role that you join into, like as no matter where you're at. But this role specifically, I feel like is a constant listening tour to your own benefit. And that was like, I think the biggest thing that I was able to learn from is I was sitting in rooms with GMs or VPs or sales reps. I mean, I had the full gamut there just to really absorb any and all information that they were willing to throw out. And I could also relay a lot of the information that wasn't pertinent to me, but to our department, and really help coordinate those communications and be like, listen, this is a need from what I found out here. We should probably dive into this need a little bit more too. So I mean, as entry level as it may seem, it holds a lot of power and responsibility at the same time. A lot of people relying on you.
Yeah. A lot of impact. I think what makes it interesting is like enablement is naturally senior because it's so visible and it has such high impact. And if enablement falls, a lot of other things do. And so your responsibility always feels like much, no matter what stage of your career path you might be at. Another thing to consider too for the associate or coordinator is that sometimes like you said, in 3 months you were moved up, but sometimes it's that your scope moves up. So perhaps you've proven that you can handle a project, that you can deliver on, content management pretty well, and that you actually have some skills in helping people, or, that one-to-one coaching needs to start happening and managers don't have bandwidth. Like sometimes that's where you'll see an enablement team get pulled into the one-to-one versus one-to-many, and usually at the coordinator level, where they're facilitating scorecards and, scoring demos and giving feedback, or, giving that sales craft insight based on the content that exists, because they know the content end to end. So there's this natural progression there where you also learn one-to-one coaching with whether you go into enablement or not. That's a skill that you need as a leader, always, forever. That's pretty valuable.
And as enablement, I mean, you, as you said, like you're pretty much up there in that rankings anyways. So enablement is a leadership role, no matter where and how you're looking at it, because you're working for and with management, the sales teams, etc. Like you do have to be on your game the whole time. So no, you're spot on there.
Well, I know we talk about enablement as consulting, and I think that that's actually what makes it leadership, right? Like everyone in the organization is your client, and you have to handle your client professionally and like you would in anything. And similar, like, you could be a BDR fresh starting out and you're selling to a CFO. And so that's the same for an enablement coordinator. It could be your first job, but your audience might be the CEO of the company. And so you have to be able to level up and handle that interaction. And enablement always requires that because we have so many leaders that are stakeholders.
Yeah, no, spot on. So we kind of talked about briefly a lot of the different entities that they could be owning as an associate or as a coordinator. What is the skill sets or experiences that somebody should have before becoming a coordinator or joining that coordinator role? Where do you see that fits in that type of scope?
So that's pretty interesting because like we are going to be hiring for one soon. I'm sure actually because you've had interns and you've hired for this role that you have some insight. But what we're looking at is really depending on where they come from. Like if you're coming fresh out of school, your extracurriculars matter. I want to see how you've organized community, gained buy-in, pushed a project forward, taken on an initiative where you saw something could be better and went to optimize it. That type of ownership and proactive problem solving really stands out. There's also the people who come from a more marketing background where there's a content creation, design, teaching even background. I had a lot of people interview who, teach English as a second language. And so they're great at that. And that's something you want to explore more. Those things all lend themselves well. And of course, if you have experience in the team, you might be supporting. If it's sales enablement and you've done sales, if it's customer success enablement and you've managed customers, that's always helpful. But I think in this role, it's really your ability to communicate, deliver, and show that you've delivered something, that you've been proactive and can take ownership.
Yeah, no, exactly right. One of the things that I have never thought about during any of my hiring was extracurriculars. So I love that you brought that up because people say resumes just don't need to include your education part, but that's huge. Like, how do you juggle those community different extracurricular activities? And that's a huge selling point. So managers, if you are hiring, ask for that. That's huge. I think that's phenomenal. It's a great way for multitasking and time management for sure.
Mm-hmm. I've met people who actually, this is great. I had someone interview with me or reach out, and I haven't opened the role yet, but they, got a policy change in their university and were talking to me about how they had to align, do a research project, prove the ROI, and present back to teachers. And I was like, man, that's a great project.
Yeah.
Or I had someone else who started their own business on the side and was like, I just wanted to see what it was like. So I had that experience. And so they'd built a business, had a team of 5, and hadn't even finished school yet. And I'm like, great, you've obviously understood quite a bit of what can break when there's no support. And they were like, yes, we wish that we could have afforded that.
Yeah.
And those are things that I think we forget to get people to tell us the stories where they're going to shine in an interview, right?
Yeah, definitely. I would say a lot of the interns or people that I've helped hire, the entrepreneurial mindset is huge because you do have to be a self-starter. You do have to be somebody that can solve problems that are way above your level and working with people that you probably would almost sometimes be scared to talk to at the same time. You have to have that, that comfortable feeling inside to be able to handle those. And I think that's where that entrepreneurial spirit comes in, and people that are starting their own business. One of the interns that I hired before I left my previous job, he had his own business already ready to go. And 2 interns that I already had their own businesses too. And they were doing side gigs on top of schooling and on top of their internship. And that was huge. It made me nervous as a manager to be like, okay, you're way involved. Let's bring it back a little bit. But it was exciting at the same time to see that they had that mindset. And actually one of my interns revamped an entire process that we had for a company-wide change. And that was mind-blowingly exciting that as an intern, they were able to take on that project and really execute from start to finish and roll it out and train people on it before they even left. So don't undermine the power of entrepreneurs, the power of those go-getters, the power of the diehard workhorses, and don't ever think that your worth is not impactful, because an intern made a company-wide change for us as well too. So
for sure.
Super huge.
Well, I think the thing that I love most about kind of this role is usually people they're still really close to either their high school or university or college education at that stage. And so they remember what it's like to be in a classroom. And I'll say this, you learn so much from someone who still has that empathy, who remembers what it's like to sit through something you don't understand, or to wish that this was an email instead of a session. Those are real things that I think when we get into business, we sometimes forget. We're it's your job and therefore it's important. Right. And we don't balance people's time. And I think your coordinators and associates are the people who never forget. They're no. I've been handed a textbook that I did not read. I have sat through a lecture I did not understand. I have definitely remembered leaving a class and still doing okay on the test. And so let's talk about what really matters. But also they're used to making change, right? The projects that you have to present, the public speaking that happens, even in graduating high school, you have to do a ton of presentations all the time. You remember that. So it's a really neat role where varied experience comes together to make really large impact, because it's a point of view that gets missed sometimes.
100%. Especially as like roles of trainers and managers when they're trying to dive in and that needs a certification, this needs a certification, let's do this here, then you be trained on that, certify that. And there comes a point in time where that empathy comes in and you're like, whoa, pump the brakes here. Like you're gonna burn these people out in 3 months. Yeah. They're all gonna leave you and you're gonna start over. So
that needs to be a meme. Certify them. It's like
Oprah version. Yeah, you get certified and you yes. Yeah. Perfect. All right. I'll create that up and I'll spin it in the comments later.
Of course.
Love it. No, that's definitely exciting. So now that we've kind of talked about like where and what experience that these people need to have, what interview tips do you have or hiring tips? Let's go interviewing first. If you want a job as an enablement associate or coordinator, what do we need to do to land that interview to get hired?
Yeah. So I'm going to say this. It's not different from any other enablement job. So these are tips that I'm going to repeat every week on the same. Perfect. But first and foremost, you have to show excitement for the company and the challenge that they're facing, right? I'm not a big fan of cover letters, but in enablement, when your experience is hard for a company to place as to why or how it fits into enablement, a cover letter or proactive reach out to explain why you feel like your skills align and how excited you are about this company and this challenge is super important. As I'm skimming resumes, it's just so helpful when someone is like, I get it. I have it doesn't look like I should do this job, but here are the things that aren't on my resume, that I teach English on the side, that I have my own business, that I actually was president of this sports club and we made a huge change. Like these are things that are important to see and highlight. And it's funny because if you're going for like a junior design position, you'd proactively be sending your portfolio out to everyone. And in enablement, I think we need to do the same. So like make your resume stand out, but proactively reach out and like choose companies you actually want to work at, because it's especially if it's an internship, you just want an internship, and I get it. Right. But there's something that I think the power balance that happens in an interview when someone says, I actually have always wanted to work at your company. Since I was little, I used to come to your company and buy books here, for example. And I remember that. And it's so exciting that I'm at a stage in my career where I can work here. You've now told them that like culture, brand, like you believe as a customer, like you've done what you need to do to say like, okay, usually you don't hire from the outside when you want someone who has that. And so if you can show that you have that for a company, you're ahead of the list in addition to like your qualifications. Yeah, no, for sure.
I hate cover letters too. In fact, I even hate writing my own and being like, hey, but I just don't like it. But you touched on this, and I think it's huge, and it's actually something that I did to land my next job. And I feel like my own personal, like, obviously the reason why I'm doing this podcast series too is like I just want to build a brand and like let's do that. But building your own portfolio and getting your name out there, doing these sessions to really dive in and learn a little bit more, showcase the work that you've done. If you're a sales rep, you probably at one point or another have done any type of enablement functions before, whether that was just an ad hoc project that your manager wanted you to help out on. Showcase that. Think very, very wide of everything that you've done and put that into a portfolio for you too. Not saying go out and spin up your own website right now. Create a Google Drive and share that folder. Like that's all you really need to do. Super easy. Yeah. But I think it's a good way for people to say, oh yeah, Ashton's got the design hacks, and it was super engaging right off the bat before you have to dive into the projects during the interview process too.
For sure. And I think, depending on the nature of the role and the impact, right? If a job description is written well, because I will also say that like not all job descriptions are created equal. And sometimes you're like, I don't even know what this is.
Yeah.
Fair. But if the job description is clear that like you're going to own like content, it's probably great to put together a one-pager on that company and send it to them.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's some things you can do to be creative and be proactive. And in an associate role, like they're super competitive, right? Because the barrier to entry is low, because varied experience is there is a ton more people you were up against, both internal and external for this job. And so you want to really push yourself to stand out and think about like, have I really thought about the problem I'm taking on? And it's so helpful when, in enablement, most of my phone screening is like, do you know what enablement is? And if you can help me skip that step, we're going to move a lot faster through the interview process.
I will also say, know the company and what they do when you're interviewing for them. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into an interview and they're like, "Do you know exactly what we do?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm pretty sure it's XYZ." No, like that was like, why did I even waste your time or my time? Like we should have just scurried that along and kind of got there. But yeah, do that research ahead. Again, that's probably gonna be a weekly tip as well. Do the research.
Yeah. I'd also say this, be sure to ask about the team you're supporting. So one of the biggest misses in an enablement interview is when I say, do you have any questions for me? And people always ask about like, what's the day-to-day, what are going to be my goals? And they forget to ask about who their clients are going to be. That is always a pretty key indicator that they maybe don't have the right thing in mind. And I think that's in all enablement roles. Like, learn about the challenge that you're signing up for, learn about the team, like see if that actually fits your skill set so you can talk through the things you don't understand. That's your opportunity to really understand what you're signing up for and interview back, right? You're not just there like groveling for a job. Your skills are important and you want to know that's the right company for you. And so it's such a miss when people don't ask that, especially if the role is like very clearly tied to a single team.
Or what the growth of that team could look like in the next few months as well too. Yeah. We're 35, but we're upping that to 200. So yeah, understand. Yeah, interview them just as much. I love that. All right, let's go on the flip side here, Ashton. If I am a enablement manager or not, and want to hire an enablement associate or coordinator, what tips should I look for while doing this as well too? I mean, I know we've kind of gone over some of this, but kind of reiterate some of this here.
I'll say this, like the pipeline for enablement hiring is pretty thin and can often take a long time because it takes people time to understand what it is. And in that time, especially for, we know women especially don't apply for jobs in the same way. If they don't see all those check boxes ticked, they won't apply. And the same goes for students or people who are inexperienced. They spend a lot of time researching what it is. And in that turnaround time, they miss out on a job or you miss out on them. And so I do think that especially if you're hiring more junior staff, it's your responsibility to reach out and find them and pursue them. Like as a leader, I make it a point to do things like this, do talks, share knowledge. If you are interviewing for me, everything I think about enablement is literally on my LinkedIn page. You will be prepared for that interview. You take the time to look there. And similarly, like I want to enable them and set them up for success, whether it's with me or not. And I think that's important. But I also think you want to figure out like, really understand who your ideal candidate is. So many times, you get into an interview where you feel a company is trying to sort through what they want through people. And that's just disrespectful. Like know exactly what this person needs to do or not do, what they need to be successful, and figure out where those people are and look for them. But you can't say like, I want all these things, and then every person that comes in with those things is not right. That's frustrating for your recruitment team, and it's just not a good employer brand. People are going to hear about how brutal that was. So I would say for managers, be really clear on the 3, 6, 9, 12-month outcomes for that person with the top 3 skills they absolutely have to have, what you don't have capacity to teach, and be mindful of what you need in order to balance yourself and your team. I, for example, am one who loves to be in front of the people and facilitating and doing all this stuff, creating content I like to do, but it's not the thing that excites me and lights me up. I know that about myself. And so my associate, I want someone who's lit up by producing that one pager, by feeling that impact of like, keeping the playbook up to date, that person who's jazzed about that, because I recognize that like, for me, that's a balance needed on my team. And so just being mindful of like what you have time to teach, what you have capacity for, and what's going to benefit your goals.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I'd also just make sure like the recruiting aspect, I know you touched on that a little bit, but be recruiting for your next role that that might be coming up, or potentially the replacement. Like we are only as good as our team that we have with us. And so if you do find somebody that's like, oh my gosh, wow, I really do love what they're doing and how they're doing that, maybe I should try to recruit them for that. You have to be an active recruiter, especially in this, I hate saying entry level. It's awful. The stepping stone for enablement.
I usually say the people who are kicking off their careers, right? They're tomorrow's leaders. And they have a pretty big ambition, right, for what they want. Thank you, internet, where everyone knows where they can go now. I didn't feel that way when I was graduating. But It's true. Like, even I'll say this for your recruiters, enablement is new, enablement is complex, and it looks different at different companies. And so spend the time with your recruitment team to really talk through, what are you looking for? What looks good? Source some of your own examples for them and help them out. And you are responsible for recruiting for your own role. So go look, go make connections yourself. I'll say this, like, having a community has made hiring for my team a lot easier, right? People are like recommending roles to me, or they're like, I saw you in a talk and I saw you were hiring. That's so exciting.
Yeah.
That's really beneficial, because, man, have you ever tried to like just Google enablement or find people? It's hard.
It is hard. Yeah. And yeah, I will make that plug again. Ashton touches on this a lot, but the community, we've built one. It's great. The Enablement Squad. Again, if you're looking for jobs, there is a channel that's probably the most active channel of, hey, I'm looking, or hey, my team's hiring, or I found this on my feed. So if you want into that, comment below. Let's go ahead and get you added. We definitely want to get there. If you're a manager,
and it has an interview corner. People will actually take the time to prep you for an interview, or as a manager, prep you to build a job description and how to interview for the role. It is crazy what you learn in a community, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've done both of those. So I've helped out with interviews, and I've been the interviewee for those too. So yeah, take advantage of it. It's so great to have people that know your field slightly better than you sometimes. And they're able to quiz you to make you think completely different outside the box. So totally agree there. Having that community is great. Any final words that you have for week 3 for the associate or coordinator?
I would say never underestimate how much of your learning happens on the job.
Yes.
If you don't know what you want to do, you're better off just trying something. And I give this advice to everybody. Enablement is a little bit blurry, and you might not realize that it's something you like. You might get into it and not like it, and that's okay. But while you're figuring it out, you don't have to have the perfect alignment, especially at this level. So I would say enablement is the really cool thing, where if you go into like the open major, you're going to learn about business, you're going to learn about organizational structure, you're going to learn about leadership alignment, you're going to learn about stakeholders, you're going to learn about sales process, customer success, learning design, adult learning. Like, you're just going to learn so much about how a company functions and how people learn in a business setting. And that education, no matter what you go on to do, is so critical. And so I'd say in this job, like, just do it. And if you don't like it, head out. But it's one of those things where don't wait to get all of the check boxes ticked. Don't wait to find that perfect recipe. Investigate and see if it's where you want to go, but you're going to learn a lot about companies and how they run from this view.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was able to answer the lifelong pending question of what do I want to be when I grow up, because I was a coordinator, and it helped me get into those steps to get to where I am today, to say, yeah, I am an enablement manager. I aspire to be more, but I know where I want to live. Like, this is the field that I want to be in. So you're spot on there. That's exactly right. Awesome. Ashton, I hope you got your chicken fried steak or mashed potatoes from last week. So
I did not.
All right. Let's get it going. I'll send some your way for you.
You know what? It'll be like end of series reward. When we get through all of them, we'll have like one where we like have dinner on the vlog.
That's it. Yeah. We'll have like a round table where we'll all just be eating our chicken fried steak.
Yeah.
Bingo. Love it. All right, week 4, don't forget, we've got our specialist and senior specialist roles. We're going to dive into those. Again, a lot of these might be a little bit repetitive, but there are so many different facets and different like focus areas that you can jump into to really learn more about that specific role. So stay tuned. Week 4 coming up next Monday. We got you back. Ashton, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me. Can't wait till next week.
See ya.